lovelies, welcome back again. So today's tutorial is on how to make a princess that's bustier dress with yoke and flare slits at the lower part, just like what you're seeing on your screen. Now before we begin, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed to this channel so far, for all your engagements, your likes, your comments. Thank you so much. I am really grateful to have you all here. Now without wasting any more time, let's get right into what we have for today. And these are the materials I'll be using for this project. I have my pattern paper here, my rulers, my pencil, my marker, my scissors, basic stuff for pattern drafting. And then I have this lace fabric here. I have 1 yard of this. I'll be using this for the yoke and for the flare at the lower part. And I have my ankara here, 3 yards of it. I have my lining just to match the ankara, and I have my interfacing. This is hairstay. I'll be ironing this on the fabric and on the lining to give it some strength. So here I have drawn out my lines on my paper. So I'm drafting out half pattern for this. So from the top I have my starting line 0.5 inches from the top of the paper. Next is my chest line, which is my bust point divided by 6 plus 1.5. I have my bust point line, my under bust line, my waistline, hip line, my knee line, the full length, and the allowance. So the full length I'm using for this is 45 inches, and I have an allowance of 1.5 inches at the lower part. So the next thing to do is from the top here, I'm going to go in by my shoulder to shoulder measurement divided by 2. I'm marking it on the starting line, which is also serving as the shoulder line. I'm also marking this on my chest line. Then using my straight ruler, I'm going to connect the 2 points together just like I've done here. The next thing to do is to mark my neck width. So I'll be using a neck width of 3 inches and a neck depth of 3 inches also. So the neck of this dress is actually very high, so I'm using a neck width and neck depth of 3 inches, and then I'm just connecting the points together with my curve ruler. Now on the shoulder line I have drawn out there, I will go down by 1 inch and connect from there to the neck width just to get my shoulder slope. And now the next thing to do is to get my armhole curve, and for that I would first of all divide that shoulder line I have. I'll just measure the entire thing and I'll divide it into 2. So it's 7 inches. Dividing it into 2, I have 3.5 inches. I'll mark the 3.5 inches there, and I'll go inwards by 0.75 inches. That's just half and quarter inch. And then on my chest line, I'll take my bust circumference measurement divided by 4, and I'm just going to connect from the shoulder slope to the division of that shoulder line that I went inwards, and then all the way to my chest line, which has my bust circumference measurement divided by 4. So that's how I drew out my armhole curve. Now the next thing to do is to take my bust band measurement so that I can measure out my dart. Now on the bust point line, the under bust line, the waistline, and hip line, I'm going in by my bust band measurement divided by 2, which is 4 inches. Now I've marked it there and I've drawn it out with a straight line just like you're seeing here. Now towards the center on the under bust line, towards the midpoint, I came in by 1 inch, and now towards the side I'm going to go out by 1.5 inches. So inwards by 1 inch and towards the side 1.5 inches. On the waistline, I'm going to go out on each side of the waistline, that bust band line I have drawn there. I'll go out by 1 inch, and now I'm going to connect the under bust to the bust point with my curve ruler just like this, and then I'm going to take it straight down. So please, if you don't understand what I am saying, you can just watch what I'm doing and you're going to get it. And now from the waistline, I'll just take it straight down to my hip line, still on that bust span line. Now after connecting all the dart points together, I'll proceed to draft out the princess dart. So moving on to the armhole, it's going to come from the midpoint of the armhole to the bust point. So now on that midpoint line we have on the armhole, I would just connect a straight line from there to meet the bust point line where the other darts are meeting, just like this. Now still on that midpoint line on the armhole, I'm going to go out by 0.75 inches on the 2 sides of that line. So upwards by 0.75 and downwards by 0.75, and I'll connect this to the bust point where all the other darts are meeting once again. So just using my straight ruler, I'm just going to take it down to meet the bust point there. I'm just trying to blend it so I don't have any sharp edges around that bust point area. Now we have to replace what we have taken off from this dart, because we're going to be cutting it out. Now when I measure from the two extensions from one extension to the other one, what I have is 1.5 inches. That is 0.75 plus 0.75 is 1.5. Now on the second line, the one that is going towards the side, I'm going to just take it up. I'm going to mark that 1.5 inches upwards. So just placing the ruler, following the same straightness that that line has, I'm just going to extend it by 1.5 inches. And now using my curve ruler, I'm just going to draw out the new armhole curve, or rather the second half of the armhole curve. So you know this princess that has divided our armhole into two. So we have the top half and now we have the second half. So this lower part is like the second half of the curve. Now I'll just use my marker to thicken the line so that we can visibly see the second side so we don't get confused. So now that that is done, I'll go ahead and extend this bust span measurement all the way to the full length of this dress. So my bust span divided by 2, that's 8 inches divided by 2, 4 inches. I'll take it all the way to the end. I'll mark it on the knee line, the full length, and the allowance as well. So I'm doing this because I'm going to cut through this point. So the entire front piece of this dress is going to have 3 parts. That's 1 center front and 2 side fronts, right? So you know that this paper is assumed that this paper is on a fold. And before I go on to take my circumference measurement, there's kind of like a keyhole situation thing going on around the neck area. Now from the neck depth, I'll come down by 1 inch. That is where the keyhole is going to start from. And then from that 1 inch, I'll take a distance of 1.5 inches. So 1.5 inches is the space for the keyhole design. So I'm going to just make a very tiny curve because I don't want the hole to be too wide. Now you can just make a small slit on your main fabric instead of doing this curve, because I'm still going to have to turn it in with a bias, and by the time I do that, it's still going to take up some more space. So I'm putting an arrow there so that I don't forget that there is something there, because it's almost not visible. And now I'll proceed to take my circumference measurements. So on the chest line, I'll take my bust circumference divided by 4, that's 9.75, and then I'll replace the little dart I have from the princess dart crossing the chest line, and I'll just add it there. It is about half an inch or so, and then I'm going to add 2 inches for sewing allowance. And now on the waistline, I'll also take my waist circumference measurement divided by 4. I'll replace the dart intake there, that is about 2 inches, and then I'll add 2 inches for sewing allowance. So you can also take your under bust measurement, but it doesn't make so much of a difference for me. That's why I don't bother taking it. So you can take your under bust measurement, replace the dart intake there, which is about 3 inches or 2.5 inches, and then you add your allowance. Now on the hip line, I'll take my hip circumference measurement divided by 4, and I'll add 2 inches for sewing allowance. On my knee line, the entire thing I have on my hip line, the entire measurement including the allowance, I'm going to mark it on my knee line, and then I would subtract 1.5 inches from it. So I'm taking off 1.5 inches from my knee line with my hip circumference measurement. And now on the full length line, I'm just going to mark it straight. So everything I have on my knee line is what I'm going to mark on the full length and on the allowance. So I'm just going to take it straight down this way, and then from the top, using my curve ruler, I will just connect all the points together on the side, from my chest line to my waistline to my hip line, and then all the way to my knee line and to the end of the dress. Now, after connecting all the side points together, it is time to take my bust dart, which is also my side dart. So on the bust point line there, I'm going to go down by 1.5 inches. Now 1.5 inches is the difference between my front shoulder to waist and back shoulder to waist. So from there, I'm going to just take it straight to meet the bust point where all the other darts are meeting. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and close it. So just picking the main bust point line and then placing it over to the 1.5 inch extension below it, I'm just going to close the dart up using my pins to secure everything in place. And after closing the dart, I'm just going to use my curve ruler again to replace whatever shortage I have on this side. I know you can see that some of the paper looks cut already. Let's just assume that I have not cut it yet, because I almost forgot about this bust dart. Now it is time to cut everything out. So from the lower part, I'm just going to cut it straight, and then I'll cut out the sides I have shaped up here. And this is almost everything for the front part of this pattern. Almost. So please just watch how I'm going to cut out the darts. Starting from the shoulder point there, I'll just take the curve of the armhole and then cutting off the center front. So let's say we're cutting two sides, the center front and the side front. So following the curve of the bust area there all the way to the under bust, the waistline, the hip line, and straight to the end. Well, I don't think there's anything I have to say here. So just watch how I'm going to cut it out. Now that I am done cutting everything out, I'll go ahead and divide the waistline. Yes, it is a half cut, so I'll cut it on the waistline, on the center front and the side front. Now I have my top separate pieces here and I have my skirt pieces. So I'm just labeling the top there, center front and side front, and the skirt center front and side front. So I'll place the skirt aside so that I can cut out the sweetheart yoke. So for that, I would start from that midpoint on the armhole line. So from the armhole point there, where I have my princess dart starting from, just right there. So that is where my yoke will be starting from, and it's going to extend all the way to the chest line. So just where I have my side front attaching to the center front is where my sweetheart yoke would start from. So I'll just place my curve ruler, making sure that it just stops at the chest line. You can go below the chest line if you want it to be deeper, but I decided to stop at the chest line. So I'm just labeling this yoke after connecting the points together. I'll go ahead and just cut it out. Now that I have cut that out, I have my top front pieces here. So I have the yoke and the center front, and I have the side front right beside it, and this is everything for the front part. Now moving on to draft out the back pattern, I have my lines already drawn on the paper here. I have my starting line, I have my chest line, my bust point line, my waistline, and there's no under bust behind, of course. So I have my hip line and the knee line, the full length, and the allowance of 1.5 inches. So from the top, I would first of all start by taking my zip allowance line first. So I'll mark that here. I'm using 1.5 inches as my zipper allowance. So from the edge of the paper, I'm just marking in 1.5 inches and taking it all the way to the end. And now moving back to the top of the paper, I'll take my shoulder to shoulder measurement divided by 2, that's 7.5 inches. I'll mark it on the starting line, and I'll also mark it on the chest line. I'll use a straight ruler to connect the points together, and then I'll go ahead and take my neck width of 3 inches, just like I did for the front. But for the neck depth behind, I'm going to be using 1.5 inches as the neck depth for the back. So I'll use my curve ruler to connect the points together. Now on the shoulder line, I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll take it to my neck width to get the shoulder slope. And now on that line, dividing it by 2, on the midpoint of the line, I'll come in by half an inch. So in front, I used 0.75 inches, but behind I'm coming in by half an inch, and I'll connect it to the chest line, which has my bust circumference measurement. And the next thing to do is to take my dart for the back. So on the bust points line, the waistline, and the hip line, I am marking my bust span measurement divided by 2, which is 4 inches, and then I'll connect a straight line. Now on the waistline, I'll go out by half an inch on both sides of that line, and I'll connect it upwards to the bust point. I don't want my dart to extend to the chest line, and I'll connect it downwards to the hip line. So this is my dart for the back, just basic. And now taking my circumference measurements on the chest line, I have my bust circumference measurement divided by 4. I'll add 2 inches for allowance as well, just like I added for the front. On the waistline, I'll take my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the 1 inch I have on that dart part, and then I'll add 2 inches for allowance. On the hip line, I have my hip circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches. And now moving over to my knee line, the exact measurement I have on my hip line, I'm just going to place the tape there, lift it up, place it on my knee line, mark that point, and then subtract 1.5 inches, just like I did for the front. So as you can see, every circumference measurement is starting from my zipper allowance line and not from the edge of the paper like the front. So now that I've marked all the points, I'll use my ruler to just connect them together from the chest line to the waistline to the hip line down to the knee line, and then straight from the knee line to the full length. The next thing I'll do here is to take off zip bulge and also shape up the center back of this dress. So on the zipper allowance line, on the waistline, I'll go in by half an inch, and then on the hip line, I'll go up by 1 inch and come down by 1 inch. So please pay attention. Now from that 0.5 inches I went in on the waistline, I'm just going to slantly take it up to the neck depth I have there at the top, and then I'm going to go down to the 1 inch above the hip line. And now from the 1 inch below the hip line, I'm going to take it into the knee line, just straight into the knee point from where I have my knee circumference starting. So this is basically the entire drafting of the back parts. So I'll just go ahead and cut everything off. So just pay attention to the way I'm going to cut it out. So now that I'm done cutting everything out, I'll go ahead and divide the waistline because of course the back is also a half cut. Now after dividing the waistline, I will further take off some zip bulge around this. So whenever I have like a joining, I like to take this extra zip bulge and it really works for me. So I'll go up by half an inch on the top part and then I'm going to slant it inwards to somewhere around the dart area. And then on the skirt part as well, I'll go down by half an inch and I'll slant it inwards also to somewhere around the dart. So this is just it, and then I'll go ahead and cut it off. So this takes off some extra zip bulge whenever I have a joining at the back. Now moving on, I'll proceed to cut the yoke for the back. So the back also has a yoke and I want it to start from where the front yoke is starting from. So the midpoint of the armhole, I'm just going to make a straight line. It's just going to be straight and I'll label the top there yoke and I'll go ahead and just cut it off. So just straight all the way into the zipper allowance area. So these are my back pieces, the yoke, the top back, and then the skirt for the back. So placing this aside, I'll start cutting. So I'm starting with the yoke, and for that I'm making use of this lace fabric here. So I'll open it up and place it on a fold, and I'll cut out the front yoke first. So placing the yoke on the folded edge of the fabric, making sure that the midpoint is on the folded edge of the fabric, I'm going to pin it down, making sure I have space for allowance all around the other parts. So on the lower part, I'm going to cut it out by adding 0.5 inches because I'm going to attach it to the main dress later. I would add 0.5 inches to the side and to the neckline and also to the shoulder. Now I'll go ahead and just cut out the keyhole design. So I'm just taking off a little fabric, maybe about 0.25. I'm just going to cut that off very little. Now after doing that, I'll go ahead and take off the pins and open it up, and it actually looks really nice. So just putting that aside, I'll proceed to cut out the back yoke. So placing the fabric on a fold again, just like I did for the front, I'll just place it there and secure it with some pins, and then I'll add 0.5 inches all around except for that zipper area because it already has the zipper allowance, so there's no need for any extra allowance. I'm just going to divide that zipper area there into two because of course it is two pieces for the back, and then this is it for the back yoke. I'm just marking the back part of the lace so that I don't get confused. So I have my yoke ready, and now it's time to cut out the main fabric. So now I'm placing the main fabric on the fold again, right side facing. I'm going to bring the rest of my top front pieces. So I have my center front here, and I'll place it on the folded edge of the fabric. I'll use my pins to hold it down, and I'm going to place my side front just right beside it here. I'll use my pins to also hold it down. So my center front is going to be cut out as one piece on a fold, and the side front is also going to be cut out on a fold, but it's going to come out as two separate pieces. I'll cut it out now by adding 0.5 inches allowance all around except to the folded edge, and then on the side I'm also going to cut it out by adding 0.5 inches allowance all around except for the side because the paper already has our sewing allowance on the side, right? So now here I have my pieces for the front ready, and then I'll proceed to cut out the back pieces. So for the top back piece, I'll just place my fabric on the fold again, and I'll place the paper on it. I'll also be adding 0.5 inches to the lower part. I'm not adding any allowance to the side. I'll add 0.5 inches to the top and the armhole. I am not adding any allowance to the zipper area because it already has our zipper allowance. Now I'm going on to cut out the skirt pieces. So I'll start with the front skirt pieces. So I'll cut out the center front by placing it on the folded edge of the fabric as well, using my pins to just secure it down in place. I'm going to cut it out. I'm not adding any allowance to the lower part because I have my allowance on the paper already. So I'm placing the side front just right beside it, and I'll proceed to just cut it out. So So now this is it for our front skirt pieces. Now the last thing to cut out is our back skirt pieces. So I'm going to place my fabric on a fold again because I'm cutting out 2 pieces for the back. So I'm not adding any allowance to the side or the lower part. I'm only going to add allowance to the top so that I can join it to the top part of the back, right? So the zipper allowance area already has the zipper allowance, of course, and then the side also has our side allowance. I'll go ahead and notch the zipper area and also notch the dart so it will be easy for me when I am sewing. So this is everything I have cut out so far. I have all my separate pieces of fabric here, and then I'll go ahead and cut out lining for every single piece except for the yoke. I would also iron hairstay on the main fabric and on some of the lining pieces, and I'll see you in my next video, which is going to be the sewing tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching this video up to this point. Bye.